What I want to do today is talk about how to become a historical fiction reader, potentially, or at least how to try it if you're a little unsure. So hi, my name is Angie. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I'm a mom to four. I love to homeschool, I love to read good books, and I love to share both of those things on this channel. So if you also like those things, please consider subscribing. So in today's video, I want to share some historical fiction books that I think would be good for anybody to pick up, especially those who don't often pick up historical fiction. So I had a couple criteria when I was trying to make up this list. The first was that I wanted to pick historical fiction books that didn't have a bunch of backstory. So maybe it got into the plot rather quickly, because I think that really helps out. I also wanted to pick fairly quick moving books, so there wasn't a ton of detail, even though I have a couple on this list that break that rule, but I'll let you know which ones those are. And then my third idea was I wanted it to be kind of about times in history that I feel like a lot of people would be interested in. So let me hop in with a new favorite. So this is a book that I have recently read, like within the last couple weeks, and I just loved it. It is Codename Ellen by Ariel Lawhon. So it's about a woman who was a spy for the British government during World War II, but she wasn't just a spy. She was a spy, plus she was also kind of a commander of a group of French soldiers, a rebel group in the woods of France, sort of idea. So why I picked this book as a good recommendation for a beginner's book is because it jumps right into the action. Within the first chapter, it is telling you about her kind of current mission at the end of the war. So you're talking like 1944. And then it does some time jumping. And the time jumping didn't bug me. It gave me some good backstory, but what I liked about it is the backstory helped me like her current character, but the current character had a bunch of action going on, and so there was a lot of interest. So it wasn't like a big lead up to all the action being at the end, if that makes sense. It was doing kind of a back and forth, which really worked for this story. And so her character was just outstanding. She was just so tough, but so real, and I just really, really enjoyed this book. So I think it's a really good one if you're interested in World War II. The next one I want to talk about is The Help by Catherine Stockett. This is such a good book. I mean, it was made into a movie. So it's about this woman named Skeeter who is from the South. She grew up in the South during a time when it was very common to have African American help, so maids and such. And this story really focuses in on the life of a maid during those times. I think it might have been the 50s. During the time of kind of these housewives and how these white housewives would treat their black help or their maids, because these women would often clean the house, do the laundry, do the cooking, watch the children. A lot of childcare happened through the African American women who helped around the house. And this main character, Skeeter, she's interested in being a journalist, and she's interested in kind of exposing that story of what it's like to be a maid in some of these houses. And if you've watched the movie does the book justice, but the book is just so good. And I just felt like it was a great glimpse into that time of history in a good historical fiction sort of setting. Okay, the next book I would recommend is The War That Saved My Life by Kimberly Brubaker Bradley. This is a middle grade book. It's also World War II, but it's told from a completely different lens. So this girl grew up in London with her little brother, and she has a club foot, so she has a disability, and she has a terrible mother. A mother who just won't teach her to walk, a mother who just keeps pushing her down, like she is not worth anything because of her disability. Like she won't even send her to the countryside when the bombings are threatening London. She had to escape with her little brother, and that's what this story is about, is her kind of coming of age, her owning her own destiny and not listening to her mom and what her mom has to say about her. So it kind of tells the story of the war via a child who was sent to the countryside in England. What happens with the rationing, with putting on like the dark curtains in the windows and all these things. They have to help the woman who takes them in. Another one that is fairly fast paced, and just the story is so heartwarming. It's a good World War II book if you don't want all the feels from World War II. The next book I would recommend as a good historical fiction for beginners is Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi. So this is a story about the slave trade. It's a very multi-generational book. So it starts kind of 300 years ago in Africa with these two sisters, and they go down kind of two different paths. So one marries a white slave trader, and one gets captured and put on a boat and then sent and sold on the plantations. And then it tells kind of the next generation, so their sons or their daughters, their stories, and it goes through a number of generations, and it just really highlights a lot of the different struggles for Africans and then African Americans as well. It kind of stays on both continents, and just the struggle with just their race and just how hard it was. It is a very heart-wrenching book, but I think the story was done so well, and it moves fairly quickly because it kind of keeps switching perspectives, which I wasn't sure if I would like, but I thought it was an excellent way to keep the story moving and rolling. So it's another good one for if you are kind of a beginner. Okay, so those 4 books, for sure, I would say definitely beginner books for historical fiction. The next 3 I have, I don't know if I would call them beginner, maybe more intermediate, but only because there is a bit more detail. But the stories themselves are so rich and so intricate that I couldn't leave them off this list. I wanted to include them just because I think a lot of beginners would enjoy them, as long as they kind of realized that maybe the books are a little bit more slow going. So kind of prepare yourself for that. So the first recommendation I have is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. This is another World War II book. There are a lot of historical fiction books written about World War II, but this one in particular follows 2 sisters. One, the older sister, is a mom. She's been married, she has a daughter, and her husband goes to war. Her little sister is single and really just wants to join the resistance and make a difference and does a lot of risky things. And then they are in France, and so then France becomes occupied. And what I really enjoyed about this book is you could really feel what it would have felt like to be one of just the everyday citizens in France when the Nazis took over. What would life have been like with Nazis walking down the streets, with them living in your houses, because that is what they would often do, is take up room in the houses of the people in town, and what that would have felt like. And then on top of it, she not only has to deal with that and all the rationing and all the cold, she also has to deal with her sister, who is such a rebel and brings trouble when she's just trying to make it through and not stir up the current Nazi officer that's living with her, sort of idea. So it is a fairly large book, and there are a lot of details, but why I included this book on the list is it's just rich in really bringing you in to what it would have felt like to be in her shoes. And I think the author did an excellent job with that. The next one I want to recommend is also a slow burn. It may be slower. For those of you who have read this, you would agree. Hold on. A Gentleman in Moscow. This is by Amor Towles. Excellent book. Slow burn. But what I really enjoyed about this book is the richness of the detail in the story. So this is about a man who's right around the Russian Revolution time. He was part of the nobility. I forget exactly. He was a count. And then the nobility kind of got ousted for the common people kind of taking over. And he got highlighted as like a person of interest who did something. He was sentenced to house arrest in this hotel that overlooked the Kremlin. And he had to stay there for, I think it was like 30, 40, 50 years, something like that. He couldn't leave or he would be shot on sight. And you'd think that would not make a good story. But what was so excellent about this book is you do hear this story. So you hear kind of the history of Russia during this time frame, just after the revolution, even through the world wars, things like that. But it's all told through this man, through this count. And his character is excellent. His character is just one of those characters you want to just like have coffee with. He sounded really interesting. And then there's a lot of other plot lines going on. There's a girl that needs his help, and he kind of takes her under his wing, and things that develop. So it's not just him sitting around. But there is a fair amount of that too. It's just done really well. The writing is done really well. And so you know that this is going to be a slow burn. It is very entertaining, and it is a very excellent historical fiction book, even for a beginner, in my opinion. And the last book I want to highlight, I read like 10 years ago, so forgive me if I don't remember the exact details of this book, but it's been one that has stuck with me. And it's the Poisonwood Bible by Barbara, oh my gosh, I can't remember her last name, but it's up here. I'll put a picture. This book is about a missionary family to the Congo in the 60s. And this man, he's a Baptist preacher, but he brings his family, and I think they have 4 daughters, and it kind of tells their story of trying to bring God and Christianity to the people in the Congo, and how well that goes or doesn't go. And there definitely has been some controversy in this book about just missions in general. But for me, that really wasn't so much what I was interested in. What I thought the author did so well in this book was just bring the culture of the Congolese people, just the atmosphere of their customs and their culture. And it just was fascinating. So you really felt that. And then you just also felt it through the girls, how it felt for them and what they had to pack and how they could pack. And I still remember bits and pieces of this book, and it really has been about 10 years since I have read it. And I think it would make an excellent book for a beginner if you are interested in that topic, because it just does a very good job of bringing out the history, the culture, as well as discussing kind of the bigger, larger topic of like the effectiveness of missions and things like that. So I really liked Poisonwood Bible, and I recommend it, even if some people dislike this book. I think it's a really good one. So that's my list, and I definitely could have recommended a whole lot more historical fiction, but I think these are really good ones to get started if you feel a little tentative, if you feel a little intimidated by historical fiction as a genre, like it's just too much, it's too boring, they're too big, too detailed. I don't think these books are. I think they will pull you in and really fascinate you. So let me know below how you feel about historical fiction. Do you love it? Do you find yourself intimidated by it? Let me know below if you've read any of these books, or also include some books you might recommend to a newbie as well, because we could always use more recommendations. So anyway, that is what I have for this video. Thank you for taking the time to watch, and please consider liking it and subscribing to the channel if you aren't already subscribed. And I will see you in the next book video. All right, take care.